Welcome to our first mini lecture for anatomy and physiology. To make things a little more easier, to make it a little easier for you, I'm going to break down the lectures into little smaller mini lectures based on topics. I'll be following along exactly with the textbook, so you need to have your textbook in front of you, and you should have printed out the notes that were posted as a PDF, and you'll be taking notes just as if you were in a face-to-face lecture. So we're going to begin at the beginning of chapter 1 here with the central question to this class, which is, of course, what is anatomy and physiology? And right now you should be thinking, well, anatomy is structure. So an anatomist is concerned with what something looks like, because that's going to perhaps suggest something is going on at the deeper level. And so physiology is the study of function. So oftentimes anatomy and physiology classes are just simply called structure and function. And while there is separate anatomy classes and separate physiology classes, it is very difficult to have one without the other. So oftentimes the anatomy complements or tells the observer something about physiology. So this is going to be a central theme not only through this semester but also through next semester in anatomy and physiology too. So at this point, what you need to be aware of are some examples of anatomy on the test. If I were to tell you that a scientist is observing something, then they would be an example of an anatomist. Now, topics of anatomy, first of all, if we can see them with the naked eye, then they would be referred to as macroscopic anatomy. And macroscopic anatomy is also the same thing as gross anatomy, but again, it is seen with the unaided eye. So this means the person does not need a microscope. Examples of macroscopic anatomy. In your book, you have one listed called regional anatomy. Regional anatomy means that the person is focusing only on a certain region of the body. So they may be looking at the leg region, for example. This means that they would be focusing on everything in that region. So the muscles, the nerves, the blood vessels, etc. So simply in a region of the body. The next example would be systemic anatomy. Systemic anatomy means that the scientist is looking at perhaps a certain organ system. So they might be focusing on the lymphatic system. And so they wouldn't just be looking at one region of the body, they would be looking at all the lymphatic vessels all throughout the body. And then the third one would be surface anatomy. Surface anatomy means the person can see something going on at the surface. The example in this picture we have above us is that when we look at the surface, there is something that looks a little abnormal in the arm area. So a good example of this would be a bodybuilder The opposite then of macroscopic anatomy would be microscopic anatomy. Microscopic anatomy means that you need a microscope. You cannot use the unaided eye. So the two examples that you should be aware of are cytology, which is the study of cells, and also histology, which is the study of tissues. Then developmental anatomy is simply following the development of an organism through different stages of life. The example in your book is embryology. So studying and looking at the phases of an embryo as it develops, as it continues to grow and eventually become a fetus. Examples of physiology are anything that deals with function. So oftentimes we're going to see certain physiological variables that indicate the study of physiology. So for example, if somebody is measuring the blood pressure, if they are measuring the heart rate, if they're measuring the body temperature, any variable that could represent a change in function is a physiological variable. And the examples that are in your book here are renal physiology, there is neurophysiology, and there is cardiovascular physiology. So the cardiovascular would be function of the heart or the blood vessels. And so these nicely go along with the organ systems that you're going to be learning about in the next part of this first chapter. Renal is the study of the urinary system and the study of the bladder, study of the kidney. The word renal actually means kidney. And then neuro is going to be the study of the brain. So a doctor who is specifically focusing on how the spinal cord functions, possibly how the brain functions, would be an example of a neurophysiologist. So make sure you're aware of these different ones. It's a good idea to go through and answer the check your understanding questions. The answer is in Appendix H, and there's lots of stuff on mastering as well. So we'll stop there. That's a quick mini lecture just on the first part of Chapter 1. I'll pick up on the next one with levels of structural organization.